Welcome back to Clarity Combos for Wedding Pros Podcast. I'm your host, Aislinn, and I'm so excited for today's episode because we have a very special guest. Today, you guys are in for a treat because Megan is going to be talking all about PR, all about publications, and this is going to be one of those episodes that you're going to want to come back to over and over and over again. So today on the podcast, we have Megan Ely, and I am so excited for her to introduce herself. Megan, if you want to go ahead and tell everyone in our audience who you are, what you do, what we're here for today.
Absolutely. Aislinn, thank you so much for having me. It's such a thrill to be here as a listener. I always love being on the other side of it as well. And so, I'm Megan Ely. I'm owner of OFD Consulting. I am a longtime wedding publicist. What that basically means is we help wedding professionals get published. And that's a variety of measures of wedding submissions, getting quoted, even in the podcast world as well. And so you can, when I offer these sort of different services, it is a variety between coaching and actual execution. Also cat lady. I don't know. I feel like I should toss that in. Cat lady, Grey's Anatomy historian. I'm a lot of things.
Oh my gosh. I love that. So Grey's Anatomy historian, like that means you've watched every episode since like 2000, whatever.
Yeah, like multiple times. So my husband's like, so wait, you've gone through how many rewatches? Have you done the math? I'm like, we don't need to. Why be so negative? Why do we have to go there? So yeah, a bunch of years ago, Alan Burke had to introduce me at Wedding Wild World. And right before he went on stage, even though we had a script, he was like, how should I introduce you? And I threw out Grey's Anatomy historian and he did it. So that's still my favorite intro.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I also love it when we tell people like the thing to introduce us as, and it's never the thing that we think is like the biggest accolade or like the thing that like sets us really far apart. It's like, it's Grey's Anatomy. Like it's that kind of
stuff. Tell them I love cats. Tell them I love cats so much.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yay. So I would love to kind of like dig a little bit deeper first into how are you helping wedding professionals get published? Like I know you've got OFD Consulting, but like what does that actually mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It means I work 100 hours a week. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't. Not anymore. Not anymore. What does that mean? And so, about 80% of our work is actually through OFD Collective, which is ofdcollective.com. We built a wedding membership about 8 years ago. It was one of these things where I saw a lot of there were, I say, challenges when it comes to publicity in the wedding space, and I wanted to solve all of them. And it finally all came together one day that I wanted to provide a home and a solution for wedding pros for sort of a high-touch membership, like a do alongside you service. So where I know a lot of people learn about how to represent themselves, they're like, that's great, but what if you did some of it? What if you helped? And so what we offer is we have a multitude of tracks. It just depends on where the journey people want to take. But we offer, we have weekly office hours for people who just want to toss, PR questions, their individual appointments. We do wedding submission services for those who benefit from having their events featured. And we also offer them PR leads, which are essentially about 20 to 25 times a month. We'll have publications we work with who are, everything from New York Times. We worked with, The Knot. We just worked with Associated Press this week. Opportunities to be quoted. And so for those who actually want to be a speaker, we have a special track for them as well. That's most of our work. But in addition, for those who are interested and have an appetite for learning, we also have courses. With the courses, they have the ability to learn how to be a wedding industry speaker, what it takes in an 8-week live class with me that we also record, but we also have a submissions course for those who are more interested in that side. And then finally, I take on a few select clients a year for coaching for people who have just very specific needs who might want to do a concentrated day with me or a couple of hours together.
Love that. I love that. It's such a niche and such a need inside of the wedding industry because I was a wedding photographer for 14 years and I got myself into the luxury space. I wasn't in ultra luxury, but I definitely was in people had money to spend and they were happy to spend it space. And I remember when I was starting to kind of get into that space, the way that I was able to leverage the different publications that I had was part of the reason why I got hired and part of the reason why I was able to be in rooms where other people had been published. You don't want to be walking into a room where everyone has been published and you're the person who hasn't. So I love that you filled this niche and filled this space in such a beautiful way.
Well, and I appreciate that, there's very few of us. You as a former wedding photographer will laugh and roll your eyes, because the fact is there are fewer wedding publicists now than there were when I, like 10 years ago. There are few of us who are really focused on that niche area. And so it allows us to really focus in. And you're right. With the generational, what we're seeing, that generational shift with customers, the consumers do want that social proof. So you're 100%, whether you're luxury, ultra luxury, or somewhere else. That's what the couples want, is they want everybody else to say that you are great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of want to just like dive into PR just in
Yeah.
general. Like a little bit of background. So in college, I have an advertising degree, and then I also have a hospitality like tourism degree. But before I went into advertising, I actually was supposed to go into public relations and specifically international public relations. So
Amazing.
it's so cool to be talking to you about PR because like a lot of the things that I like do in my business are leveraging PR, leveraging authority, leveraging these different times where like maybe like I've been published or maybe like one of my clients has like an international client. All these different things, these are used to get you further in your career. And I see so many people who just don't even know that that opportunity is available to them to use PR in
Mhm.
that way. So I want to like just kind of like dive a little bit deeper in that with you.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And there's something that you said I want to point out for a second, if I may, is that you have that background in hospitality as well as PR. And this is what I tell wedding pros. Listen, whether you have a degree in it, you've got the background, the experience, a mix of all of this, at the end of the day, having that willingness to serve and want to serve other people and really fall over backwards for people, having that as a training ground in hospitality makes a really great transition on the PR side. Like my background's is events as well. I worked in venues for about 7.5 years. And a lot of my team has been in events as well. And having that kind of bend over backwards so that you can work alongside the media really does make a difference when it comes to that. And the other point you have too is people don't realize this is an opportunity. It's one of the things I get teased sometimes when I get introduced on stage. People have said, she's the only person who's going to come here and tell you how not to work with her. And I'm like, listen, like you can work with a publicist, but the fact is there are so many opportunities for people to represent themselves in the wedding space. And it seems intimidating, but with the right small steps to get going, there's a lot that can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. We just had a client who this year, she has a six-figure photography business as of this year, and she also has a 9 to 5 corporate career. And this year, like she said, I want to retire from my 9 to 5
Yep.
and like I want to be charging like 8 to 12K for weddings. And I was like, perfect, let's freaking do it. And so this year we had her like do a lot of like publicity and then we leveraged that publicity afterwards. So like she submitted to Over the Moon. She was published in Over the Moon.
Yeah.
She's been published in Style Being Pretty multiple times this year, but it's what
That's
we did
amazing.
after. It's what we did after that I think is so important that so many people miss. And it's the being able to use that as a way to open doors and being able to use that as a way to connect with people. So I love having this conversation with you.
Absolutely. It's press will only live as long as you allow it to. That's what people have to understand. Like the work doesn't end when you get accepted. That's really where the work begins.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the conversation I think would be so beautiful for us to have is around like some of the mindset things that come up for wedding for
Yeah.
professionals, because I'm sure I am sure you have heard it all. I have also heard it all as a coach. Like a lot of people just think like my work isn't good enough for publication or I'm not far enough along or only that particular subset of people are allowed to be published. And I have
Mhm.
so many thoughts on this and I know you do as well. So let's dig in.
Well, I think when it comes to how you want to be published, first and foremost, let's just address the fact that not every PR strategy in the wedding space is for everybody. Wedding features work best for photographers, planners, venues, florists, event designers slash stylists. The end. Like there are some people say, "Oh, well, I can't do that." Well, that's fine because you could be on podcasts, you could be on TV, you could be quoted, you could have features written about you. There are things you can do. So let's just I immediately want to dispel that because there are so many ways. Then, where I hear what you're saying the most here is like, I hear that most with wedding submissions, is like my stuff, my portfolio, because the expertise stuff comes with time. Frankly, some people are too confident in what they think they know and they could be quoted. I'm like, you've been doing this 5 minutes. Why don't you get some more experience, guest blog, and we'll get there later. So, if we want to land on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel most people have those mindset issues around their own weddings that they're doing. And I have to remind people, first and foremost, publicity is icing on the cake, on the wedding cake, if you will, at the end of the day, because the fact is you're being hired to do a job. It is a business transaction, whatever it is that you're doing for said wedding. If the couple's happy with the finished product, as are you, great. The end of story. Like let's be happy with that. The knowledge has to come that not everything is going to be a fit right now for what the editors are looking for. And it depends on what editors you're looking at as well. I think a lot of people are really hard on themselves because they're like, well, Vogue would never want this. Well, that's okay. I mean, it'd be amazing to get in Vogue. It'd be amazing to get in Over the Moon. It'd be amazing to get in Style Me Pretty. But they are businesses that are looking for particular content and you can't control the content that comes out. You can't control, even if you are the planner designer for a wedding. At the end of the day, the final selection is usually the couple, right? If they have their heart set on pinks and golds, if they have their heart set on rustic chic, it is what it is. And if the editors are not looking to that, which is more of a common aesthetic that we've seen time and time again, we have to make peace with that and understand that that doesn't go back to the value of what you do and the value of you as a wedding pro. It just means at the end of the day, we need to be realistic about expectations. We need to understand that editors have particular needs based on their business goals, and not everything that one does can be controlled. Now, there are plenty of things you and I can agree, especially from the photography side, that can be controlled, but not everything can be controlled. I don't know, am I heading down the right path here?
Yeah, I mean, I love everything you just said. Like, and I absolutely agree. Like, there were so many weddings that I had that, like, the clients were some of the most incredible, wonderful, kind, sentimental, amazing people in the world. And their wedding day wasn't necessarily
Yeah.
the thing that was going to get published in Style Me Pretty. And that's
Yeah.
okay because we still had an amazing experience together.
Yeah.
And then there were other couples who they really, really focused on aesthetics, but the story wasn't necessarily there. So they might not have been the reason why we would get published in Brides. For me personally, like I try to like talk to my clients about this too, is like using opportunities and also
Mm-hmm.
like really understanding like what the publication like industry is looking for, and like
Uh-huh.
also recognizing like you said, podcasts are a great way to like do like the PR route. It doesn't
Yep.
have to just be publication. So I think that's
100%.
actually where I want to kind of like want to talk more about is like what are some other options for people if they don't want to get their weddings published.
Absolutely. Or they find themselves up against, maybe I say, too many challenges beyond their control, right? Because how many planners have we worked with who have amazing weddings, great aesthetic, and then you've got a photographer who doesn't know how to properly light an interior? Like, I've seen it, someone who we've seen it. I see it all the time and it drives me bananas. So there are so many other ways to go. Like I said, well, to be meta, podcasts, Splendid Insights has shown us that couples love to know about your portfolio as much as your personality. One of the best ways to showcase your personality, yes, it's through the written word as well, but it's also through having these kind of thoughtful conversations. There are a bevy of wonderful wedding industry podcasts to consider on the B2C side as well. I mean, I know we're talking B2B, but on the B2C side, if they want to get in front of their couples, I would say, I'd push over to TV as well. TV is not my medium. I do recognize that people like the social proof of it. I would tell people that if you are looking to pursue TV, just make sure that you're really clear on what you want to happen for that to be a success. Because a lot of Gen Zers do they even have cable? Like, why? I don't know why people pursue local morning shows sometimes when their audience isn't watching it. But in addition to that, I would say a couple other things. One is, if someone's primarily focused at the local level, if they have new, exciting offerings, moves in their company, something news that is going to be interesting outside of their circle of friends and family, then they can pitch it to a local publication. I mean, if you're in a smaller second or third tier city, I myself am in Richmond, Virginia, they love knowing about creative wedding pros doing something kind of neat and different. In addition to that, I would say being quoted by wedding publications. So wedding publications, there are just so many out there. Let me be super clear. Wedding blogs, when we talk about Style Me Pretty, green wedding shoes, over the moon, take a look at those, because most of those are going to be actual weddings, wedding features. They're going to have an advertorial piece to it. Some styled shoots, not all of them, but you're not going to see a lot of editorial content outside of that. No, but what we're talking about, the larger publications such as The Knot, you see it at brides.com, Bridal Guide, so on and so forth, those larger publications, as well as mainstream and lifestyle outlets. We've worked a lot with New York Times, Architectural Digest, so and so, Apartment Therapy, who have wedding sections. There are plenty of opportunities for people to be sources in these spaces. Because how many times have you seen, of course, even in the photography side or florists or destination weddings, and you see the same people being quoted over and over again? And it's like, well, they've prioritized putting themselves in front of the writers and building a reputation of being someone who is easy to work with and great to work with. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but those are some of the top ways that I'd love to see wedding pros taking advantage.
I love that. I love that. I also love hearing that like you could be an Architectural Digest or that you could be at the New York Times, like, and you could be quoted in those spaces because it's so like, there's the normalized side of publication and then there's the side of publication of like things that you just might not think about unless you are literally around someone who's a PR specialist. Like you
Well,
just might not even think about it.
And may I tell you a quick Architectural Digest story, just because it
Yeah.
shows how this is a building block, right? I've been doing this 15 years, and many, many years ago, we're talking like 10 years ago. Well, I'm trying to think how old my kid is. So like 8 years ago, we were using a free, but we do a paid service called Haro, Help a Reporter Out, which is turning into something called Connectedly, but it was a free to low cost way of connecting with writers who had stories. So we got published through that years ago with Martha Stewart Weddings, which was very exciting. And I went to research the writer and thank her and let her know like how much we appreciate it. I found out she'd recently moved to Richmond, Virginia. So I was like, hey, by the way, like we live in the same area. How funny is that? She's like, you want to get together? So we actually became friends. Like we actually became friends. Our kids are the same age. That's why it's important. She ended up coaching me through, and I promise this gets back to Architectural Digest. She actually coached me through potty training because she had just met with the writer of the potty training book I just read. So like, this is how we're bonding. Went to her kid's birthday party. She moves. We stay in touch. She's a lovely person. Over the years, she moves into other verticals. Like she's in this like home decor lifestyle, all this. One day, and then over the years, she would write me for like tips with her new kitten. So like, this is how we become friends over here. Then out of nowhere, she writes me and says, hey, I'm wrapping up with Architectural Digest. And, I'm not in the wedding space, but they're looking to build more of a wedding space. I'd love to introduce you. And that's how it happened. So it's funny how, the 7-year journey of just, friendship and being a consistent source really can lead to bigger opportunities. I always thought it was funny, like teaching her how to cut her kitten's nails led to like these opportunities with Architectural Digest.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. Like I love other connectors, and I love like when connectors are like super good at like just like staying on like top of mind and staying in touch with people. And like I think this is such a like important like note to make, is that sometimes in the wedding industry there is kind of this concept of like, oh, I always have to go after like the newest like best planner and like go make friends with that person, or I have to be in front of like the best venue. I have to like go do all these like new things. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think we like really forget that there are relationships that start out as one thing that will shift over time into something else. And you never know what the connections are that will lead you to your next milestone or your next
Yep.
publication or your next wedding. And so just like kind of going back to that idea of nurturing and connecting, I think is so important as a wedding professional.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why it translates super, super well over in the PR space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone was listening to this episode and they have never ever been published, like they haven't done any kind of PR, they're maybe like in like let's say a photographer like in the mid range, like 5K to maybe 8K, like what advice would you give that person?
If it's a photographer in particular, what I would suggest is really starting with the good old fashioned goals. Like, what am I expecting out of this? What has to happen for the PR to be a success? Because, yes, you and I talked about the sexy as seen in the social proof with that, but it's also going to be related to, SEO, the backlinks. How important is that? A lot of, I would say, photographers in particular come to me and say, well, I want to do press so I can keep my planners happy, your referral base, I want my couples happy. So land on that first. From there, what I would do is start asking yourself, what media outlets make the most sense for me? Now, notice I did say, what are your dream outlets? What are the places you have to be someday or you'll die? I don't mean that. I mean, from a business transaction standpoint, what are the media outlets that will put you in front of people who will potentially book you and or be impressed if they see that on your site? Then you're paying attention. I want people to set aside, I'm giving them homework. I hope you don't mind. I'm giving your podcast audience homework. 15, 20 minutes minimally, but ideally give me half hour a week for a while, just as you narrow down these outlets, just read them, follow them, get to know what kind of weddings they're looking for. After a month, two, if you're starting to feel like, okay, depending on how much you expedite that, you're going to want to look at your weddings. You want weddings less than a year old. You want to submit those weddings. That's what the photographer should be doing, is look at their weddings, ideally less than 6 to 9 months old. I mean, the sooner the better. The ones that really match the aesthetic and look and photography style of these blogs and publications, like that's what we're going to want to do. Like those are little steps to get you started. Now, if a photographer is listening to this and say, I don't want to do any of that, then you can always look into some of those free and low cost services, such as Connectively, formerly Haro. There's one called Quoted, QWOTED. Those are places where people could, sign up to be sources and just see what comes their way to be quoted.
Love to hear like your opinion on timing, because I
Yes.
get this question a lot from, and I'm sure you get it too, like a lot of my clients who do want to get published, they'll ask me like, oh, should I, it's October. Should I be like submitting this spring wedding right now, or should I be submitting an October wedding? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and your advice on this if you're willing to share that.
Yeah, no, always I will willing to share anything. So when it comes to the timing, here's the thing. It depends on how seasonal the wedding is, right? So if you've got a wedding that's in October, you would never know what month it was. You don't have to worry about timing as much. If you have something that is decidedly very seasonal or tied to a holiday, you are going to want to send it out usually 2 to 3 months prior to the actual like time of year. All editors are different. All editors are planning differently. So bear in mind, print is going to look different than my answer for online. So it really narrows it down to what publications and blogs are you looking at? How far out are they taking things? And if you've got a really great New Year's Eve wedding, we don't submit it January 3rd. You wait, well, not that the photos be ready, you submit it 2 to 3 months prior, the year prior for that. I think that's going to be the best thing. Now, exceptions to the rule here. Like I said, if something is going to be more general when it comes to that, then you should be submitting it as soon as it goes out to the client and you're ready to go. Like that's the thing is weddings will date themselves quickly. It's going to be the decor, the aesthetic, the style, the clothes everyone's wearing. Get that out the door. I would say that people need to understand that everybody in their predetermined off season, which for a lot of United States in particular is that kind of mid-November through March, like it just depends, right? But that's a quieter time. That's when everybody wants to submit. So I would say try and create a robust system if you're doing it yourself within the season so you're not submitting with everybody else as well.
Yeah, and then also just like timing of things. So I look back at like when I got published and like I had a very long career and I was very willing to like get rejected and like put myself out there to get published. And so
Yeah.
some of the times when I was submitting, it would be like kind of just a normal wedding, like there wasn't any seasonality to it. But during the COVID years, during the very, very beginning, we had those like bursts of micro weddings where it was like
Yep.
10 people or less or 7 people or less. So the weddings that I got like published in for Martha Stewart weddings were actually COVID weddings with 7 people or less. They were
Yeah.
micro weddings. I submitted those as soon as I could. Like
Yep.
the wedding was done, it got delivered to the client, submit immediately because I was thinking about the opportunity of it's not going to matter in a year from now or 3 years from now about micro
100%.
weddings. People want that content right now. So I think that's something important to think about too, is just timing of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not in those times anymore, so we don't have to luckily think like that. But I would say, if I may add to that one that you bring up a good point about a quick turnaround time, is going to actually be high profile couples. So oftentimes we're working with we're working with the actual maybe photographer, so on and so forth, and they have a couple that's celebrity or celebrity-ish. Now, depending on their level of celebrity and their publicity team, they might be handling it. But if they're not, then what you have to do is really turn that around. For a photographer, we're talking 25, 44 photos if it's going out to People magazine. You really need to turn around in the first 3 days. You want to make sure no one's sharing the images. And there's a very particular set of photos you're looking for. So I would contend too that even though we're not in COVID times and thinking like, oh, I got to get this micro wedding out anymore, we really don't. But I would say if you have anything tied to celebrity, you're going to want to get that out quickly. And then if you have anything tied to a theme, like let's say the next Bridgerton season's coming out, like I don't really want to see Bridgerton weddings in between seasons because it's been done 1,000 times. But like I do want to see something as it's tied to the next season coming out.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's like such a great piece of advice to kind of hold on to. So one thing I wanted to talk about was the mindset because I've been coaching clients and wedding photographers and wedding professionals for several years now. And it's inevitable that someone is going to submit something and they're going to be so excited. They're going to be like, this is the best wedding ever. It's the best story ever. I took the best photographs ever. They're going to submit and they're going to get rejected. And inevitably they come to me and they say, Aislinn, I'm never going to get published. Like I'm
Yeah.
so upset. Like, I'm taking this personal. And of course we go through the mindset side of things. And then inevitably they get published in Martha a couple months later. But
Yeah.
what I want to talk about here is when you get rejected, the mindset behind getting back up again. I'd love to hear
Yep.
your perspective on this.
Absolutely. So my perspective versus my perspective for the clients as well, because for me, 15 years of publicity, I get rejected more than I get accepted. That is life. Like when you shoot big, you're gonna get big no's, but you're also gonna get big yeses as well. So that's I live that every day. Like not to brag, but I am used to rejection. So that's a part of it, candidly. But when it comes to the clients, we try to prep them ahead of time, right? And make sure they understand. We actually do something called the State of the Wedding Media. We do it every January now. And what we do is we pull the metrics from the major publications so that people can arm themselves, because every publication has their own metrics, but there's no hub for all of that. So we go to the big ones. Like, we literally hand count everything. We said, this is the average turnaround time. This is how many weddings they published last year, so on and so forth. So arming yourself with the information ahead of time takes the emotion out of rejection. If someone's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get a Martha Stewart. Well, a couple things. One is they've had a changing of staff in the last year. They have a change in the way they do things. They average 2 weddings a month. That is 24 total for the year. Yeah, what's the reality of someone being one of those 24? I mean, we've been published in those 24, but we also know that it's going to be slimmer, when it comes to that. So with people starting off, the mindset starts by coding it with the right information, by coding yourself with the statistics that are going to make it a little bit more realistic for you. From there, I would say also making sure that, you might have a pie in the sky place that you want to try, which is great. I personally, we don't like to submit to anywhere unless we have at least a 50% chance of it. And part of that is out of respect to the editor, to make sure that we're not sending things that we know are not a fit. But from there, having strong backups that you can be excited about. That's what we do with our places. We never just say, let's just send it there and see what happens. It's, here's a media plan of 3 to 4 places in a row. So starting that, because it's one of the things you said about like getting back up and doing it again. It's like, no, girl, I want people to say, well, it didn't get picked up by Brides, which was my number one choice, but I've got this next great place. We can very easily turn it around and go from there. And I think at the end of the day, it goes back to what we talked about is your value, you, the royal you out there, your value as a wedding pro should not be tied to what an editor says, because an editor, they're very discerning and they're very wonderful. And it's great that you can hear from them and get accepted, but they are coming at it from a very different angle than your goals for shooting someone's wedding, if we're talking about photographers, or executing their day, if we're talking about other wedding pros as well. So with the best of ability, take the emotion out of it, give yourself some strong backups.
Yeah, I feel like you and I have very similar like thoughts around like facts versus feelings. Like she was talking about like having like the actual data. Like I love that your company does that, and I love that you
Yeah.
guys have like those numbers for your clients. That's the facts. The facts are Martha is only going to take on was that 24 in a year. That's
Yeah.
different information than a couple of years ago. And then the
Yep.
feelings are, okay, I submitted to this one, it didn't get accepted. I'm going to like have my little pity party for about an hour, and then I'm going to go like submit it to the other people on my backup.
Yep.
Those are like the facts versus feelings, which I think is so, so crucial, because if you only ever submit to one place, like, and you only ever submit once, it's a 1 in 1 chance. Like
Yeah.
versus if you submit to a ton of places, it's way more likely at some point that yes, you're going to get rejected, but yes, you're also going to get accepted too.
100%. And that's why I really push on the diversification as well. Like, not every wedding needs to go to a national. There's so many fantastic niche local. So if you are just mixing it up, in addition to that, finding other ways to get published, like the reason we really, our offering for submission services includes those PR leads. Because we're like, listen, if an editor is going to take 8 to 12 weeks to get back to you, and then if we don't get it, we have to try it again. In the meantime, you should be jumping into PR leads. Like, you should be jumping into other ways. Jump into my office hours. Let's get you on some podcasts. Like, there are so many other ways to be published as well.
Yeah, I love that. Also, I love that podcasts are now like one of the ways that people could do that, because I just think back to like when I started weddings and you said you've been in it for 15 years.
Yeah.
I think back to like 2010, 2011, like podcasts were not something that you could just go hop on, but now it's like kind of mainstream.
I was going to say, it's definitely become, ever since Serial made it like so with crime kind of podcasts. And so right now, we monitor over 100 wedding industry related podcasts that we just, we listen to, we pitch, and we work with. And again, it's great for anyone who likes to share, by talking versus the writing and so forth, or to mix it up as well.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny because I wanted a podcast for a while before I
Yeah.
actually started my podcast. But I think back to like 2020 and 2021, I did 77 free coffee dates. It was like I craving
Wow.
connection. So I look back and I'm like, what were you doing? And I'm like, well, I had nothing else to do. As during that time, I was like, I just missed talking to other wedding creatives, and I just missed the conversations. And it's like, it's so cool to be here now in 2024, having
Yeah.
a podcast where I get to continue to have those conversations with people, because I think connection is so important in the wedding industry, and to have a space to cultivate that, I think is really, really beautiful. So I love that podcaster thing.
No, 100%. I enjoy it. And we always make sure that we're out and about and encouraging people as well, because I just think it's a wonderful medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about how to leverage a publication or how to leverage a quote or leverage a feature. I think this is such a great way to kind of like wrap this episode up is talk about like, yay, good job, you got published, or yay,
Yeah.
good job, you got quoted. Now what? So I would love to
Yeah.
hear your side of this.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, press only lives as long as you continue to you're going to be the one who has to get it out the door. I would say start early and often by creating a system that you can, if you can, delegate out to people to help make sure. Because a lot of people say, "Well, I just got published," but it's like October. I'm too busy. It's June or whatever. It's like, no, no, no. You should have a system in place, some sort of checklist, so you get through all the things. So first and foremost, with any sort of new press, you want to make sure that you've got a plan to put it out on social. You want to make sure that your preferred social channels, that is going to be, put it in your grid. Do you put a logo on it? Like have that ready to go. Like if you know something's going to go live, you can pre-prep all of this and then just click publish when the time comes. You set aside budget if you want to post it, so on and so forth. If you are a photographer in particular, making sure that you spread the word so that they've got the photos and that everybody has, most importantly, who to tag in it so that everything goes out and everyone is shared, and it's definitely going to get more eyeballs on it. If you are someone who maintains a blog, which is great, you want to make sure if you've got the photos readily available for that side of the wedding submission, having a blog in a draft ready to go that will send, you want to link over to the feature and make sure that they get the eyeballs over there as a courtesy. If you were someone getting quoted, of course, that looks a little bit different. You can still blog about it or do a roundup if you've been in a lot of things as of late. And what I always tell people is this is when you're putting that kind of content together, when you are responding to an article, the writer only uses a handful of sentences, but you're writing full on paragraphs a lot of the time. If that's the case, use some of that other content not used to augment your thoughts and add it to the content as well. So going ahead and doing that too. From there, if you're someone who has a newsletter, just making sure that that's included in the next roundup of whatever that you're putting out there as well. It kind of, everybody's a little bit different when it comes to your email marketing strategy. So I want to be careful with that. I would also say quarterly, you want to make sure that you're updating your press page with your latest press to ensure that that is, or if you are someone who limits it right now to kind of that as seen in with a bunch of logos to update too. Finally, if you are someone who got the big win, the People magazine, the brides, the Martha, like whatever that is to you, I would stop everything. And that's where you're going to want to update your Instagram bio as seen in. You're going to want to update your press page immediately. You're going to want to update your like all the logos and all of that as well. That is going to be so important to do that too. So really it's what can you do to work within the parameters of what you have already to make sure the word gets out?
I love that. I love that. And I'll just kind of add on to that a couple extra thoughts that I had. So if you have an email signature that says that you've been published in certain places, you can add it to your email signature.
Of course.
The other thing that I would also recommend, and this is what I've recommended to my clients, is to send, like, let's say you're a photographer, send an email to the planner and the rest of the like big players on the team and like thank them. Thank them for the work that they put in. Thank them for like their like co-creative space that they're like creating for each other. Like thank them because it's not just you as a photographer or just you as the planner who like made this happen. We also want to celebrate the rest of the team and make sure that they like obviously have the links and everything to celebrate, but just like having that extra touch of like, thank you for being part of this and thank you for making my job easier as a photographer. I think that's a really great way to kind of wrap things up and
Yeah.
just kind of have that gratitude.
I'm going to add a little augment to what you're saying too. We're big fans of Postable. And so Postable's a really fun, so I'm sure you're familiar with it, where you can send cards out and so on and so forth, and you can actually upload your own photos. So for the photographers out there, if you got a great shot of a planner or so on and so forth, like I'm still a paper girly when it comes to it as well. And I think I would just caution people when they start adding, like, and I should have mentioned this before, when you mentioned email signature, I thought about this, is just be careful about licensing usage for some of the logos that are out there as well, because I don't want anyone to get in trouble for having logos embedded in areas, whether it's your email signature, your website, so on and so forth. So just a little like cautionary, tip over here.
Yeah, I was more thinking of like as seen in and the words rather than as seen in with
That's
the actual logo.
perfect. I was going to say, be careful, everybody. I know everyone does their stuff, but even on the website too, things in format, you just want to be careful with the rules.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like just to kind of wrap this up, because this has been such an incredible conversation. And like, I feel like we've like hit a lot of great topics about like the different
Yeah.
types of publication. We've talked about how to leverage your publications, like how to get into different things. I think the thing I kind of want to wrap this up with is how can people work with you? Like, what are the different pathways? Like you've talked about how like you have different pathways for people. Can you kind of explain like the ideal person for each of those pathways?
Yeah, absolutely. The courses is the easiest one to answer. This is someone who really wants to do things on their own still. Maybe that's what their budget allows for. Maybe that's what their bandwidth is allowing for right now. And again, people who are really hungry for knowledge. And so our submissions course in particular is going to be great for photographers, wedding planners, pardon me, venues, florists. We tend to work with the most, and designers. And typically they're 0 to 3, maybe upwards towards 5 years in business, where they're still doing a lot of the things on their own potentially. So that's great. We do that once a year. We always promote that on our Instagram, all of that. For the speakers, that's going to be best for someone 0 to 3 years in their speaking career who are ready to start putting together what topics they have or refine the things that they are doing. We have a mix of wedding pros there. As long as there's someone who they're looking to dip their toes in the B2B space, it doesn't matter how far in yet. It really depends with that. But someone with a sincere interest in speaking. So the courses, that's an easy answer over there. With the coaching in particular, that is going to look a little bit different. It's very individualized. If somebody's looking at all their offerings saying, I need something more specific, they're going to have to come to me directly on that. Typically, I have a pre-existing relationship with them. Most of them come to me because they really need one-on-one media pitch coaching or speaking coaching on that side. But let's dig into what it really is. It's OFD Collective is what most of the people do when they come to us. We have 3 tracks: editorial, submissions, and speaker. Again, speaker, it's going to be best for those who, I always say, you want a wedding pro with some speaking experience minimally, who has an idea of what their goals are. They have their topics ready to go. Hopefully they've done some training if they felt that that was a necessary part of their journey. And they also have a way to monetize, because the fact of the matter is when you go out live on the road, to diversify your revenue streams to only focus on speaker fees is not realistic, like unless you're getting outside of the industry. So that's going to be best for those kind of pros. Now, for someone in the submission track, again, going back to, of course, photographers, planners, so on and so forth, those guys are going to be best for that. Typically, they're 5+ years in business. I'm not saying it can't be under, because we have worked with people, especially people who have worked in the wedding industry for years and have opened up their own shop. That's a little bit different than someone who's like brand new at it. Those guys are going to typically be people who they are media savvy. A lot of them have been published and they're just ready to hand it off. It's just like me with accounting. Could I do it? Sure. Do I want to sit in a pile of receipts and cry for 10 hours a month? No, I have better use of my time. These are the people who are ready to delegate, to say, this is a headache. I don't enjoy doing it, or maybe I enjoy doing it, but it's best to spend my time doing X, Y, and Z for business development. So typically they're coming to us and they're ready to have this really, candid, great, trusting relationship with a publicist who can be very open about, these are your goals. This is where we'd like to get you, so and so forth. Finally, the editorial track, that is going to be best for someone who still is doing their own submissions, but would benefit from having a publicist in really any category that they can jump in and chat with, and they can benefit from sharing their expertise. We work with a lot of people who love getting all those backlinks, like people who love the backlinks, people who love getting the as seen in, and they really, again, as a time saver, instead of following all the publications, pitching all the publications, they're like, why don't I get PR leads and editorial opportunities emailed to me instead of me doing the heavy lifting? So that's going to be a great track for them.
I love that. I love that you have so many different pathways for people to succeed, because
Yes.
like everyone's going to be different. There are going to be some people who want like to go down the speaker track. There are going to be some people who are like, I am so done with submissions and I want somebody else to do it for me. And some people are like kind of like somewhere in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, let me just say that a lot of publicists have a retainer where it's going to look a little bit different, where it's really fully involved. I'm going to do all your press, all the things done for you services. We've chosen not, like we've moved away from that in the last 3 years. We've chosen not to specialize in that so that we can specialize on these very particular journeys for wedding pros.
I love that. Do you have any like final thoughts or any final things that you just kind of want to like say to anyone who's listening to this, who is like, wow, okay, I have so much to go do. I have so many things that I want to do with this information. Like, what would be some final like thoughts for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I say start small. Start small. That is going to be my first bit of advice here. You want to make sure that you are focused on things that don't overwhelm, because as more as you work them into your actual day-to-day workflow, the more likely you will continue with them. So start by asking, what do I want to do? What has to happen for that to be a success? What do I need to narrow down? Narrow it down, start small, and add to. Like, you're going to listen to me and think, this is of interest. This is not of interest. Like, that's okay. What are the publications from there? You have to make sure that you've prepped yourself to be ready to receive this sort of promotion. And this isn't just publicity. This is going to be social media, email marketing, all of those. The call to action is always to send people back to your site. And I think some would argue your Instagram as well. So have you done an actual audit to make sure that how you feel about your brand and what you want to project is actually what you're projecting? making sure that your site is accurate, making sure your branding, your portfolio. How many times do we talk to photographers in particular, not to pick on them, but it's like, when's the last time you have updated your galleries on your site? Like, what are you doing to actually convert business when people get to you? But just making sure that you've got your proverbial ducks in a row. And then finally, again, quoting Peloton, forward is forward. Start small with something that interests you, whether you're joining up for one of these like free or low cost services. Just take a look at your weddings and find two that could be fun to work with. Join Two Bright Lights, which is something that in IELTS Society has a metrology system as well. Join things for free or low cost that can help you, move the needle.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love that you touched on like you need to like basically be ready when like you get published. I
Yes.
used to, one of the first things that I did when I was a coach was I was doing Reels Advisor. So I was helping different like coaches and wedding professionals create Reels because back in 2021, it was brand new.
Yeah.
And so what I had to tell my clients was, okay, let's just say you go viral. What's your plan? Let's just say something takes off. You have, 500 new people who are following you, or you have 100 new people on your email list. What's your plan here? Are you actually
Yeah.
prepared for that? So it's kind of the same thing with publication is like, it's great if you want to submit, but are you prepared for the aftermath of getting accepted?
Absolutely. Why go to all the trouble if it's not going to convert in the end because you didn't do the heavy lifting? It's kind of like when I do my bigger speaking engagements with a lot of visibility, like I always tie in any updates to the site to like Wedding MBA because I'm going to have 2,000 people watch it. I've got to be careful with that. So I practice what I preach with that as well.
I love that. Well, this was just such a beautiful conversation. Like from a PR standpoint, like I loved having this conversation, but just also from like being able to share you with my audience and share your wisdom with my audience. I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for having this conversation. It was so lovely.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to kind of take this thoughtful road together with two people who, have been in this space and seen what it's like to get published and the rewards of it.
Yeah, I mean, I just like thinking back, like you said, 15 years and I was 14 years. Like it's wild to think how much PR has like both changed and not changed at all in the
As
past
much,
15 years.
yeah, as much as things have changed, so much has stayed the same.
Yeah. And to be able to like kind of watch it over time, because there was a time where print was like the only thing that you could do. And then there was a time
Uh-huh.
where online was definitely more the thing to do. And it's just changed so much.
It's
But
a
at the
good
same
mix
time,
these
it's
days.
PR is PR. Like public relations is always going to be there.
Yep, absolutely. Well, so we hope. If not, I'll have to go figure out how to monetize being a Grey's Anatomy historian. So,
Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you for being here on today's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. All of her links are going to be in the show notes. Everything that we talked about today, I'm going to make sure that you guys have access to in the show notes. But I will see you guys on the next episode. Bye.